So I got baptized the summer I turned 8, and I to this day I cannot remember a time ever doubting God's existence. I mean, when you think about the stars and the earth and how all things function, it just makes sense. What I couldn't quite understand though was how a loving and just and righteous God could ever love a kid like me. Growing up, I was sexually abused, but also had heard so many hurtful things, like you're a failure and you're worthless and you're never going to amount to anything. And years of trying to combat that. I mean, it can only work for so long. And by the time I was a teenager, I started to really believe that. And so that was my identity. Like, I was a failure and I was worthless. And I remember the summer of 2017 was probably one of the hardest summers of my life. I was in a job that I wasn't passionate about. I wasn't excited about what I was doing. It was just work. I had a really good friend die that May, and it just felt like everything that I had sort of strived to build my life toward was falling apart. I just didn't feel like life was worth it at that point. And so on August 5th, I attempted suicide. I wish I could say that that day was the hardest day of my life, but it wasn't. The hardest day was the next morning when I had seen that I was unsuccessful. And so there are two parts of that. There's all of the guilt and the shame that you feel for having had made such a permanent decision. But there was also the reality of what I was feeling, which was just frustration that I had failed. I think one of the most impactful things that I heard in that time was something we heard at the women's conference, and it was from Tracy Patton, and she said that
it's okay to struggle, but it's not okay to isolate.
Surrounding the attempt and all of the feelings I was feeling after, one of the biggest things I wanted to do was isolate. Fortunately enough, I have really good friends who didn't let me. It was them. It was so very much the support of those people and them pointing me back to God and just being there that sort of gave me the courage that I needed to sort of keep coming back. I think I've learned the importance of community, the importance of having people who really love you and who support you around you to help you carry the burden, but to also help continuously point you toward Christ. Even when I felt like I was unlovable and like I wasn't worthy of something, I would try to remind myself that A, that's not true, and B, there's a God who loves you because of all of these things. And none of those things, the beauty is that none of those things have anything to do with me and have everything to do with who He is and who I am because of Him. And so I think that process, sort of refocusing myself around God, sort of was the beginning of the healing process and was the beginning of me, in truth, really figuring out who I was for the first time, I think. So to those who are struggling, I think it's really important for you to know that you're not in this alone, and somewhere there are people who love you, who care about you. And if by some stroke of genius you can't think of anyone, you have a Father who loves you and who cherishes you and who has fought for you. I think that's important to know.